Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping into a distinctly grim, honestly almost mythic landscape to conduct a really dark character study. Now, for those of you who love literature and examining the intricate architecture of a character's descent, we're looking at what is essentially an inverted hero's journey. So instead of a protagonist traveling into the unknown to return with some great boon for society, our subject, the Wanderer, travels into the dark only to return as a literal avatar of it. We're going to examine the exact anatomy of this dark transformation, breaking down the philosophy and the philology that expands this fable into an absolute masterclass on the rejection of humanity. I want to hook you immediately with this cold open quote from the Wanderer's opening monologue. He says, "Look at the dawn, you see a new beginning, but I see only the unmasking of your fragility." This perfectly establishes his entirely cynical worldview right out of the gate. Where we might look at the morning light and see, a symbol of hope or renewal, the Wanderer looks at that exact same light and calls it a flickering lie. To him, daylight is just a trap for the weak. It's designed to give them false comfort before the storm inevitably hits. Okay, let's dive into this first phase, the Temple Crucible. To really understand this chilling perspective, let's walk through how he actually reached it. Mapping his transformation, we see this necessary crucible for what he perceives as greatness. He begins in what the text calls the infinite abyss, this space of profound darkness and suffering. But rather than being broken by it, he undergoes a fusing of scar tissue. And actually, scratch that, it's not just physical healing, it's a structural hardening. He's actively shedding human frailty. By the time he emerges, he's achieved the unmasking of reality. He looks at the horizon with cold, clinical clarity, having completely conquered his own existence by just erasing his vulnerabilities. Let's do a quick philological close reading of this specific phrase from the text. A jagged monument of unyielding stone. Think about the word choice here. A monument is usually built to remember the dead, right? Which implies that his former, softer human self is entirely deceased. His physical transformation replaces soft, permeable flesh with an armor made of fused scar tissue. He isn't just surviving the harsh environment anymore. He has literally become the purest expression of the desert itself, jagged, unyielding, and totally impenetrable. Moving on to part 2, embracing absolute isolation. So that physical impenetrability we just discussed, it directly mirrors his new philosophical stance on society. He realizes that a crowd is simply a collection of crutches. This brings us to the parable of the severed shadow. According to the Wanderer's twisted gospel, this parable is proof that any connection to another human being is nothing more than a fortress out of dust. Think about that imagery for a second. A fortress out of dust is something that looks structurally sound, but is destined to just blow away at the very first gust of wind. To him, the desire for companionship is the ultimate submission. It's a pathetic admission that your own solitary soul is insufficient to endure the silence of reality. And notice just how extreme his logic gets here. For the Wanderer, needing another person isn't just a weakness, it is a fatal tactical error. He views intimacy as literally handing someone the shears to cut your own throat. If you care for someone, they can hurt you. Simple as that. Therefore, the only logical defense, the only truly unpierceable armor, is absolute isolation. As a reader, it forces you to look at isolation not as some tragic consequence, but as a highly deliberate tactical defense. He doesn't just endure loneliness, he weaponizes it to keep himself entirely safe from betrayal. And this brilliantly illustrates our third section, the law of subtraction. This tactical defense is the guiding universal principle of his journey across the desert road. Let's narrate these steps, because they show exactly how his original trauma was inverted. Step 1, remove the soft. Just eliminate any emotion that makes you hesitate. Step 2, leave only the jagged. Keep only the anger, the coldness, the defensive edges. Step 3, weaponize trauma into a selection process. Instead of viewing his past wounds as things that need healing, he wears them as an iron crown. The trauma wasn't a tragedy to him anymore. It was a brutal test that he proudly passed to become a weapon. The forgiving hand only invites a heavier blow. He completely dismisses mercy as a luxury bought by the blind. There's this deep, grim pride in him now. He takes immense pride in his ability to watch the world suffer without feeling a single ounce of pity, because to feel pity would be to invite that heavier blow upon himself. Which leads perfectly into part 4, critiquing human connections. This absolute lack of mercy builds into a blistering critique of human relationships in general. The Wanderer reflects on the parable of the frozen tear, which teaches the lesson that to love is to mortgage your peace to the grave. I absolutely love the philological breakdown of a word like mortgage here. A mortgage is a long-term debt, a literal death pledge in its Old French origins. He frames affection not as a gift, but as a voluntary infection. It's a sickness you willingly take on, a debt you can never repay, which renders the sharpest mind dull and totally vulnerable to the hammer blows of a cruel world. The crucial point is captured perfectly in this metallurgical vocabulary. Warmth rots the iron of the spirit. Just like moisture rusts and degrades metal, human warmth and care degrade a person's resolve. To the wanderer, a caring heart is essentially a shield made of glass. Sure, it might look pretty, but it is just waiting to shatter the exact moment real force is applied to it. So let's look at part 5, strength or tragic delusion. All of this brings us to a really fascinating academic debate. When you analyze a character like this, you have to ask yourself, is this final, unyielding shape he's taken actually a mark of true power, or is it just profound psychological damage? Let's use a bit of Socratic dialectic and compare these perspectives side by side. On the side of strength, he has become an iron fortress. He is a flame that needs no air, completely self-sustaining, the purest expression of the desert's harsh reality. But on the side of delusion, we really have to wonder, is this entire philosophy just a massive trauma response? Is his claim that society is a collection of crutches actually masking his own cowardice and his fundamental inability to handle warmth? Is this self-proclaimed missionary of desolation actually just trapped in a flickering lie of his own making? I am the frost and the hammer. This quote just drips with tragic irony. He stepped through a necessary descent into evil to become completely independent, a flame that burns without fuel. But his intention now is to turn the rest of the world into a mirror of his own desolate heart. By striving so incredibly hard to be detached and isolated from the world, he is paradoxically obsessed with punishing it. He can't escape his connection to humanity. He can only interact with it as a destroyer. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought. Is the final, unyielding shape of stone a crown of victory, or is it simply a tomb? By achieving absolute isolation and making himself unpierceable, the wanderer has certainly survived. But in doing so, he has basically buried himself alive inside an armor of fused scar tissue. It's a brilliant, haunting character study of what happens when his soul trades its humanity for invulnerability. So I'll leave you with this. Think about the true cost of that absolute isolation and whether any armor is actually worth the price of the person trapped inside it.